Spring crickets. It's coming. I think it's turned already. What do you think, folks? You're going to get an early growing season this year, maybe. Maybe. Should do it. The signs are all over the place that we're going to be in a little bit of trouble, it seems. And again, it'll be how good you respond to it. I see lots of people talking about how many guns are in America and all that. And I'm just hoping it came through that last night as well. I hope we learn we resist the urge to use them against ourselves. Because that's what the divide and conquer proxy war world is about. We're going to have to come together and learn how we're being played, and that's going to be key. Just key. And we're going to have to convey this conversation to other people in a nice and a logical manner. You're going to have to be intelligent, not smart. In fact, you're going to have to probably learn how to throw away everything smart so that we can overcome all that problem. Remember, that's what they want, smart. They don't want you intelligent, because smart is what they are, and the world we want is what they want, and not you. And we've all, over and over, it's about control. And over, the control they want to put on has nothing to do with reality. It's the future we want that's been created by a bunch of psychopath, insane people. And so it's the future we want, or the future we want, folks. Not the ones that the economic World Economic Forum wants for you. Again, sustainability is sustainable debt. Sustainable occupation. If you didn't see it before, way back in, I think it's 1856, Bouvier's dictionary, your character was an obligation. So revisit Martin Luther King's statement, but he's being focused on the content of your character. I told you that guy was trouble, but he was telling us something. Like all this truth, it sits there to do. The content of your obligation is your servitude. And then it makes more sense that we see and how we see the civil rights being right there to be found and read all by yourself. You don't need anybody to interpret it for you. 42 USC 1981, and you find out you live under exactions of every kind and no other. Exactions having only one definition, one of the few words in the language that has one definition, meaning extortion. So I find it really interesting that the matters that I'm dealing with here recently are exposing there's an extent to the extortion, and it's not supposed to be in the official dumb. You might want to be considering what you feel about and think about official dumb, and how dumb are you to consider that it's better than you are and has more power than you, in particular when you start looking at land law and the law of the land in its literal sense. And then more importantly, as you come to terms with the real situation of relationships that are set up, and how the government doesn't become the sovereign against you in your land and your right to move around. And we have a long way to go for the mass of people to hear it. We have a long way to go even for the people that listen to me on how to work it out. And in fact, I'm still working through it. And what it is we're working through the criminality in the system, as well as just the base ignorance, completely base ignorance. In fact, not to go too deep onto it, I had another call. I was talking with someone, and they come from the internet. They got all this knowledge. It's all, like I've told you before, it's like sawdust blowing in the breeze. All in a trapped room with fans blowing. And the first thing I had to do was pull all the fans, turn them off, and say, let's let some of this settle down. Let's look to see, once it's settled down, what your narrow objective is, and we're going to go after that objective. And so this is the very first thing, as I'm trying to figure out what to tell you all and how you apply what you know, is you have to find an objective. And that's why that passion I keep telling you have to build. And you have to run with that, because that's probably the only thing that's going to sustain you to fix the wrong that fix the wrong that you need to be made right. And not in the opinion of it, but in the actuality, the principle behind it all. So, and on that land law stuff and stepping up, thank you very much for those of you that went to Jefferson Mining District and put your name and you gave me an gave us the district's database gets an email, that it gets sent out now to the committees, the Natural Resources Committee, that you stepped up and took the responsibility to say, I'm not going to let this attorney say that he represents my rights. That's imperative. We had a nice little burst of people coming in and doing that, and so I thank you for doing that, because I think it's powerful. And just to let you know, I'm still researching it down, but another bill that came in to do another modification to those rights actually got shut down in the Ways and Means Committee there, and I'm still trying to figure out, if any, what part, if any, the statement saying you as a government have no right to interfere with this disposition of soil, let alone the attorney that's lied and misrepresenting and causing felonies. You as a government don't have the right. That a bill to prohibit and constrain and expand the constraint against this mining law and your use of the property, which extends to water, highways, patents, the underlying power of patents, the relationship between Congress and the states, and then you as a beneficiary, even if you've never done it before, you are the beneficiary to the right to do it. That's the big deal right there for everybody that's not actually tied in. This is everybody, folks, actually, that should get over to Jefferson Mining District and fill out that petition. So during the broadcast you did, I noticed later, I didn't get to it for a couple hours, and all of a sudden we had a bunch of new people sending out the email. And that's all you're really doing, is you're just sending out an email to the resource committee saying that it's not proper what the attorney, the bar member, has done, saying that he represents you when he didn't even actually ask you and never got your consent. And so this is your way to overthrow a presumption that's created when he said that there was, and that they took it in. And I'm not sure, because it was a different committee, I'm not sure how far this petition went, but I have to believe that it's sending a message. And that last little burst of people went in, and so it's important that you get involved. And I can't imagine the simplest thing that you can do is a couple mouse clicks and some keyboard strokes, and you got yourself a simple petition. And I understand there may be some people that don't do these petitions, because I'm one of those people. I don't normally do petitions, but we have no designs on the email address and name that you give us as far as the district is concerned. It's just simply a easy way to send the notice that you were not contacted by this attorney, and he does not have your permission, your consent to deal with your property, your rights, even if you're not exercising them, before the state legislature. This is so important. And so the petition's a simple way to send that message. And like I said, I don't know, we haven't even thought beyond getting people the ability to send that the name and the address of the email. I don't even know that we've even had a thought about even using it beyond this purpose, because it says that in the document on the web page. We only wanted to use this for the purpose of helping you to tell these attorneys and these people that are in the government that are attorneys and political party members, which we also sued in 2013, telling them that they are committing felonies. And then you can step up now to call that out. Go in jeffersonminingdistrict.com and fill that petition. It's just a simple name and email. So thank you very much for those of you that did. I like to see that was a nice little burst, right? And it happened right before they were able to. It just died in this Ways and Means Committee. Another encroachment. Now the attorney that we're going after tried to take credit, but there wasn't much credit that he had actually done, because it was the inaction of something going forward is what happened, and a lot of that inaction has to do with the Ways and Means Committee, which I can tell you back in 2013 when we first started involved, they could care less. Doesn't sound like that's the same, folks. It sounds like something's changed. So we're still going to research about that, but I can't help but thank you again and again. Just people stepping up. Stop being those crickets. It's so important on whatever. And so, and don't take any guff from people. Get educated in the subject matter that you have to, in the right subject matter. As I said before, communicating with a couple people, I had to turn the fans off in the room, blowing the dust around. All the information they got off the internet was completely irrelevant to what their need was, and I had to get pretty quickly down to let's discuss your need, not what you think applies. Because when you get down to this land disposal law, it's very narrow path, and it's very easy to work through. And once, like I've said, it takes, maybe this is not the platform to explain it, but on the broadcast, but once I can sit down and talk with people and tell them how to, explain where do you go, how you look at this, where these facts are, these laws are, how you interpret those. It's all written down. It straightens up a ton of things fast. And people can start to see that there's a road less traveled, again, as Gary L's broadcast name program comes back up. So, it's that you're taking that narrow path that not many people take. You don't run with the herd. You don't go after herd. You don't follow the herd immunity because you're not even in that field. You're taking the road less traveled. You're taking the narrow path that we're told we take. And we do that by self-constraint on the subject matter that interests us and staying so close to that. Don't let ourselves get pulled off. Because they're there, the highwaymen and the robbers are there to pull you off into the darkness and beat you up, thug you, if you get off the narrow path. Important story breaking right now, and as we talked before, understanding your terrain and the battlefield, being able to be resistant against what appears to be authorita. It is authorita. It's what it appears to be, and you have to recognize that instead of authority, with jurisdiction and authority, power. You got to remember the power is in you. Power is the word here. Jurisdiction and authorita, or authorita and authority, that's just stating you have a power. So power is really what you're looking for. You have to know that's in you. You can't have a doubt. In fact, I'm talking with people more and more. I'm saying you can, again, it's coming down. You cannot have a doubt that what you're doing is the proper way, that you have the right to do it, it's the proper way, and it's different, or what you need to do, contrary to what other people who are trying to trespass on that say. That just calls them as they're a criminal, and you have to just have the certitude and the fortitude to move your position forward. And you're not going to get that out of your opinion, and you're not going to get that out of broad checks on the internet. This is really a dangerous thing to go out and think that there's tons of people out on the internet with lots of information, although everything I can find now is from the internet that I use for helping people, just to guide them through what's out there. All these little things that come up that people have the misconception on is really dangerous, and I'm a lot concerned. This is why I talk about this gun I can hand you. It's like handing a gun to a little kid. What I can do to explain the condition to people and let them have their eyes to see, and then they can take it from there. Just doing that is like handing a little one a gun. It's really a serious thing. It's there's a lot of burden on me to do that. Why I take some time and become so direct and I don't say forceful in the way of forcing in conversation. I make sure that the conversation is directed. It's not just all this knowledge. I mean, just pieces of information that are all over the place. And so one of the more difficult things is when these people speaks under the color of authority, and you realize that you have something to say, and they don't want to recognize it. And so you have to look for other evidences. And the big thing that just came out, I want to make this lead the broadcast today, was making you aware again, no different than the Disneyland thing where the mumps got spread around. And they found, I said, I wonder if anybody's done any DNA checking to find out what strain is being put through the herd, and even those that weren't the herd, about getting vaccinated, and found out, in fact, when the tests came out, the DNA of the contagion, as you're going to see this word developing now all over the place, contagion happened to be the modified one in the vaccines that was spreading. You have another one now, and I'll tell you, folks, I've been doing, over time, I've noticed this one seems to be pretty good. I don't know about it being made now, but the pertussis vaccine actually can do something if it's a well-done one. But maybe not so with the newer ones. So here's the additional warning. Not only did the Disneyland incident, who they were blaming on the unvaccinated, actually originate from the vaccinated, here's another condition that looks like it's the same thing, but in pertussis. Whooping cough. You really don't want to get this thing. But anyway, recently vaccinated kids are spreading pertussis everywhere. And this became important because I went through a Twitter line, and I don't even know how I'm following this one. I just started following this one account. I don't even know how I just started following it, but I follow. I continue to follow it. I don't block anybody or even cut them out. and it happened to be an interaction where she's a mom and a geneticist and all this other kind of stuff, and DNA type follower. So it's kind of an interesting watching a whole different mentality. But one Twitter came through, and it was a mother whose daughter had been halfway given the shots of pertussis and blaming, found out there was an unvaccinated kid, little goat, that hadn't been vaccinated in school, and the school was blaming the one that was unvaccinated for the transmission. And wasn't, I don't think 2 days later comes this story that recently vaccinated kids are spreading pertussis everywhere. It could have been the mother's own child doing that to another, and then they blame it on the unvaccinated. And so this is the time for this. I think springtime brings this one on. It's becoming more and more, and whooping cough becomes more and more prevalent this time of year, it seems. Also in fall, but it's also the kids getting together. So be careful. Watch that the ones that if you don't vaccinate, be careful. The transmitters are actually the vaccinated ones. So get the information. The blogcast will have this link. I won't read more. This is a big deal and problem. This is trying to get you into certain information that makes you feel like you're under power. See, you have a doubt, and then you get this information like this. It says, wait a minute, this is still an ongoing. If they thought it was settled, if their science has been settled, it certainly has been found to be fraudulent in the beginning when we're coming up finally and finding out these kinds of things. And I'm not saying pertussis is the only one. Remember, we had I think it was the mumps at Disneyland, and we had another one before that. And so this becomes an opportunity for us to say, wait a minute, even if vaccines are good at some level, and I've done the reporting to show you that they found the actual science behind this, and I'm not talking about the quality of the vaccines themselves, because the components they use are high question in my mind, but the technology behind what causes the body to work in the way they say it works doesn't work when you overwhelm the body. There's actual scientific studies that suggest highly that it's the amount you put in yourself all at one time, which is why it's no good for little ones up until like 5 and 6 and 7. The way they dump 69 different vaccines into you. That if you stretched them out, if the mother and father took control, and you only gave what you felt was necessary, and only at the time and in the time frame that it worked, that some of these may actually be very good. And so I want people to understand that there's a reality that goes on, that we got to be careful of going one side or the other. We really have to pay attention. But when you're blamed as an unvaccinated party to causing the pandemic, which is an invented term as well, they're criminalizing someone who is probably an innocent, when we have another story that says the vaccinated ones are actually the ones that are the ones that are causing the transmission. The other contagion in our life is these polytics and what to do with them. And I want to touch on this part, that on whatever y'all think, and I know probably all the listeners behind Woodshed are pretty well beyond all this for the most part. But there's a point to be understanding about in the law about these polytics that kind of warned me off a long time ago that I want to touch here. Texas can't restrict candidates from calling themselves psychologists or counseling people just for not meeting occupational license requirements, was a headline that I wanted to touch on, partly because of the word candidates and then what they call themselves. Let me just read the first paragraph and then we'll go back to the point I want to make. And this is also a larger point about the monopolization of private agencies, private trade unions that go out and make criminals out of those that aren't part of their trade union as it's colored by the state authority. Remember, this is a felony as well. The state of Texas here, the state can't make it illegal to call oneself a psychologist or to enforce the laws, quote, limiting the ability of individuals to dispense personal advice about mental or emotional problems based on knowledge gleaned in a graduate class, close quote, according to an interesting opinion from the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals regarding the Texas law. Now, I'm not going to go through the point. There's a whole lot to discuss on these. I just don't have the time unless I start getting some feedback that you want to kind of go through these things, and I may have to change a bit. But there's opinion that you got the link in the Blogcaster link later on. And those of you on Spreaker, remember, when you click on the broadcast name, you go to the broadcast file, look down on your left-hand side, your content links are right there on the lower left-hand corner of your page or so, I think, and just click it on over, and it should kick you on over to the Blogcaster. Once I get it posted, you get these links. You can get the black and white in your eyes how this works, folks, because then it becomes very important how you proceed through this new normal they want to keep shoving down our throat. There's a way to push that new normal back to being rational and intelligent. So what they're telling us here is that, and the obvious thing, you can't stop a candidate from lying, I guess is the bottom line. I'm going to tell you about this to speed this up because I got so much to go here. You cannot, you have no right of action where candidates lie to you. If you haven't figured that out, there's court cases on this. That they can tell you whatever they want is to get you to get that vote, and if they get the vote, that's it. They can't be held to their promises. They can't be held to whatever they say. It's like a freedom of speech unless they walk into their own meeting hall and they say there's a fire when there isn't. They are free to say about whatever they want. And so I want to direct, because I don't do much of this politicking and this voting and this parasitical stuff. Drives me nuts just to hear it. Folks, I'm getting, I don't even know what I'm getting. We're so screwed. SCROOD, for those of you sensitive about spelling. Screwed. We, the people, are so screwed right now with the politics that we're being shoved at us. It's scary. It's scary. Anyway, I'm feared, folks. We aren't calling this out, but these people can stand up there and they can do whatever they want. They can lie, and they can lie right to you. They can say they're going to do. And if we didn't learn that by the unqualified one, Obama, and all the lies and the oxymoron that guy became, exactly as I predicted it back before he even got elected. I said, folks, it's coming. This is the worst of FDR and the worst of Lincoln. And I don't know how to, I guess reasonable minds can differ, but I don't know of many people that could say that it hasn't been, when you look at the reality of it. A guy that's a Nobel Peace Laureate that kills people with impunity? Are you kidding me? So, Texas can't restrict candidates from calling themselves anything. And you can't use a state agency monopoly to impose. And that would go right back over to Washington State, finding out that dentist case may have interrupted what they do in Washington. At least they were looking at it to say, wait a minute, we as a monopoly bar association can't be making decisions against people that are not bar association members with regard to what they call themselves and what they do. Now, as long as you don't make a commerce connection, they can't apparently touch you. And so I want you to read this case about this. There's 2 points here. We're starting to see a little bit of the confine of the commerce state, and then the people that are outside of that, the unlegals, the outlegals. And really the state being legal, being outlaw, where there's no moral component. Again, those licenses that they give you, those certifications are really just licenses to pursue unlawful activity, and to the limit thereof. And that's what you find out these licenses are, the strict liability, if you will, for limiting the liability to the standard of the statute for the certification, which would otherwise cause you to be acting outside of your actual natural power. And so you start understanding this is like an inverted system we've been moved into. But you can be lied to, and you can't about a candidate, and you can't. There's nothing you can do about it. And people haven't really picked up on this. They just kind of complain that you didn't do what you said. All these people can document how many times the unqualified one has lied, and nobody can do anything about it. Should have warned you off of this system. As I've been trying to tell you, the legal technical side of this is you're just opting into a franchise, a utility franchise. It's like the voting issue is a franchise. Like your power franchise and your cable franchise on the main thoroughfare. It's a franchise. It's invested in you by your acceptance of some servitude status. The vote that you give, of which on the national level, is useless to you. Literally useless. And if you don't understand this, you really have to look at this closer. That now you start to see why. It's just one big lie after a lie, and you can't get the liars for anything because it's just a big lie anyway. That Texas has made the decision you can't restrict a candidate calling themselves a psychologist when they haven't been part of that private trade union that controls itself as under color of authority. And I'm bringing it up that way because this color of authority, to me, is a key. It's now I'm focusing on this a lot. It's been the last couple of years now, but I'm saying it becomes a really quick way to out these people who are authorita and try to interfere with you in your natural abilities. If I don't want to say natural rights, because that's an interesting and totally oddball type of construct. There's quite a different number of facets to what opinions about natural right. However, what is unlegal is a whole different realm, and I've been able to delineate. I'm being able to delineate this for you, actually, and for what we're doing, what I do, even more. As I told you last week, I can now see the producers are protected in the Constitution, and all the legals, the ill eagles, the sick eagles that are out there, get care underneath the state as a statutory help, not a constitutional protection. And all you got to do is look for it now. I'm starting to see where, now new realizations of old information. So what's legal goes by these legalities that if you don't comply with them quite right, if you're disparate in your knowledge, it's spread all over the place and you haven't organized it, you're going to have trouble stopping these people, which is why this next story becomes important. You've got these pharmaceuticals, they've got the vaccines that they give themselves immunities to, that actually might have some validity in some instances. Certainly not the amount they've given themselves license for. The government's given license to hurt you underneath the vaccines. The people that make these decisions are these candidates that run around that are liars that you can't stop for lying. And you can't hold them accountable for much of anything. Now, that ends where you can find their oath and office and duties, and they violate it outright, and you do the record, and you start working toward that. That's addressable. But these are all the same liars that are now moving into the making decisions for your life, giving these corporations, which is all the bottom line. And when you find, 28 U.S.C. 3002, whenever money is involved, you're dealing with the government as a corporation. That's for finances. Don't extend that beyond too far unless you can find another statute that moves it. But finances covers it pretty well, don't you think? That the United States can be dealt with as a corporation that way, that at the bottom line is the bottom line. And I'll say it again, Clint Richardson's a corporation nation. He was able to take what I attempted, in my feeble attempt, to offer Walter Burien a video for PEG Access, give him a video documentary place to make his information. I took it from him, tried to make a program. We did okay, but then Clint comes along a couple years later and absolutely takes this information and exposes this condition of the corporate bottom line being the government and its players, which are the corporations. And I understand I don't know, I didn't get it qualified. I think Clint Richardson's actually archives are going to be running on UCY.tv, so I don't know if he's on RBN anymore or not, but I was told he wasn't. But the archives are there. Clint went down a different trail, and he goes deeply into the words. So I will say go ahead and listen for that, but understand when you get into the statutes, the legal, you have to deal with those words the way the legal deals with them. And so be careful of not getting too wide too broad on the terminology. However, he has some fantastic information. Corporation Nation was the broaching of these concepts of the bottom line, and then his lethal injection went even further to expose this immunity the government gives to itself and its own in order to hurt you. And that was a contribution that I made for Title 50 to him when he saw what was written in Title 50 to do that. Title 50, understand, is that statute code title in the United States Code that's the appendix is the whole of Title 50 appears to be supported by Title 12, 95A. So Title 12, Section 95A. That is the economic servitude. Go read it. It's right there for us. It's all ties in. The appendix of Title 50 talks to you about the Trading with the Enemy Act, completely in commerce. And they're going to, and the public good becomes the government good, and that's where you see the immunities given. So there's a way to go through this. There's a why you see the propaganda against unvaccinated, non-use of the system, and it can be seen as one thought to be driven by governments that show that you can't stop liars, you can't have them be stop them when they are in the offices being liars, the way we're going at it. And a lot of this is because you're not in the condition that you were thinking that you were in. And even though you can find lots of information on the internet that will explain it, that explanation is not how you take out and expose the system. You don't speak through it sounding like some lunatic. You have to go at it from the construction and establishment side. And you don't make a question of it, you take it literal. As I was telling you, everyone wants to spout off about this act of 1871 and the districts of the government and all this other stuff. Well, folks, use it. That's what we did. That's what a quo warranto does. It goes after the legitimacy of the establishment that is dealing with you today. Because that 1871 says they're not legitimate. Instead of complaining that they're not legitimate, point it out when it comes time that they're coming against you, like I've been asking people to explain, if they can, if they get themselves knowledgeable enough with this Portland and Burns and Harney County and Ammon Bundy thing was. I told you, if they established there was no jurisdiction, and even our 2013 case proves it, there's a couple cases. Our case in the quo warranto, it was supported by a ton of case law before it. It's not like we just invented this. It's partly how I knew that this was no good. But it comes right out of the statutes. I'm not speaking outside the statutes. Again, that's the occupier's language. You've got to learn how to speak through that. So you get inside the lie and the people that you vote in that are liars and they do a fraud and they're doing felonies, they're criminals, and you can't really do much about that on the surface, and there's other things to happen. Don't go negative on me here on that there's nothing to do, because there is. And then you get these judges are all part of this, and they're all trade union bound. They're all agencies of the government that look like what you thought was a government. And so you get these decisions that lead you on a path that you have an understanding, and you just stop fighting it. I mean, at some level. I'm not saying don't resist the oppression and don't resist the occupation. I'm saying stop fighting the reality. Go ahead and accept it. It's a lot easier path. I can just tell you that it's not surprising that when you see. And I keep telling you, there's a certain way to communicate to the occupier, that entity, that thing, that organization, that establishment that has power. And then we're talking now real power, the power to come down and beat you down. The physical power. Not the legal power, the lawful power. They physically are a gang that can come and beat you down. So if you don't do it quite right the way they say, they don't have to listen to you, and they got all their excuses all lined up in order to show you why. And so it doesn't surprise me when you see these headlines that aren't actually what went on, but they give us an indication on how you can proceed better. Judge okays FDA decision to approve additive ban in 150 countries was the title. Last Thursday, a federal judge in California dismissed 2 lawsuits claiming the Food and Drug Administration illegally approved a dangerous drug for the use in animal feed. That's you, folks. A dangerous drug was put in. They sued, and the Sierra Club is somebody I would normally have an aversion to for lots of good reasons. But they're there doing their thing, and they see that there was this chemical put in the feed stocks that build muscle mass, and that those things may not have been checked out. So these 2 entities, Center for Biological Diversity is also another one. United Farm Workers of America, Animal Legal Defense Fund, Humane Society of the United States, they all jumped in and they made a lawsuit. But the interesting problem was, in this drug, and they talk about the drug, and if you want to read about it, you need to know this is what they're putting in their meat. That the title of this says the judge okays FDA decision. Well, when you read and find out what happened, they actually didn't. The judge had to just go with what the process was, because the process had not been fulfilled correctly by the people that were suing. In other words, this wasn't ratifying this drug. This was saying that the people that came to sue, with their bar member attorneys in lead telling them how to do this, didn't do the process afforded to them to tell you and to fortify and confirm to you that when there's a process in this reality, when there's a process available, you have to fulfill the process. But before you have what they call the standing to go and challenge this correctly. Why? When I tell you about coordination and what we do as a district, and we go against these plans and we make our responses to them as a coordinator, not as a public commenter, but as a coordinator, a government with sitting at the seat of the table to decide this, pursuant to law and the needs of the people, as the law also says is supposed to happen, contrary to what agencies do, then you provide a standing for yourself that you argued the proper way. That in this case, the smart, rich, cha-ching attorneys decided they were going to try and go around the process the FDA provided and not fill out the citizen's complaint form in the process to fulfill that requirement on a so-called citizen in order to challenge and give notice to the agency, in this case the FDA, of the improperness of their process. And so for me, this wasn't a judge saying that he okays the additive. This is saying that there's a process, and you're going to follow that process. And all these cha-ching attorneys got big bucks to do it wrong. And they'll do it wrong for you. And yet the rules are there for us to see that you can do it right. And you have to do it right. There is a right way to go. I'm not saying I like it. I've got another opinion when it comes down to producers. But this is more like production. This is industrial production. And these are chemicals. So these are different things that you have to look at. So I'm just kind of wanting to call your attention here, even though this is, it is. I mean, if this drug hasn't been tested, again, because of the rules, the government gets to continue upon its deference of an authority under so-called best science. Because no one did it just right is no less the harm to people. They're going to allow this because the process wasn't followed correctly and by the people that we thought were supposed to know better. Which I'm telling you over and over, week to week, year to year, they don't know better. I'm talking about the bar members. I'm telling you that they are fulfilling sustainable development. And sustainable development is the not cool. It's the label, the destruction of any labeling notice to you from international sources. It's the imposition of UN and other types of authorities that are international upon your necessities. And so I just want to call our attention that we can go through the story. There's a ton to read. I just look at all this important information. It's not important. It's important for you to know if you're going to go there. If you're just a listener, passive listener, I'm wasting all of our time at some level. But if you're an informed listener and you want to somehow do this, but it's not on feed, then you got to have to know what you're being told by this news that says a judge has authorized this use, but in fact they're identifying the process did not meet what was offered. Now, I read this, and I have 2 links for this. Judge Okay's controversial drug and animal feed. He actually just said that the people who sued to stop it, that it wasn't right, didn't have standing because they didn't follow the process. Now, to me, that's a big deal problem, but I can't untangle that not quite yet until we have a lot more people doing it right, and then we learn where the presumptions are that give these people this right, and we reverse that problem. Knowing that we're dealing with a corporation who that's the government, who, and again, they're not also have a status as a sovereign. It's different, and they also have one as a proprietor. It's even different still. All these, you just got to keep track of what they're dealing, what your subject matter is. But they are allowing to themselves the ability to give an agency deference where the system happens that their own people, their own corporations, remember corporations are people too, do it mostly right. And these administrative processes are supposed to be your due process check against your rights, the presumption of honest action of which is extended to the corporations. Because we all presume to be innocent, aren't we? So right in front of our face, they're utilizing these principles that they deny to us in other places, or apparently deny. And I can show you it's the same process. You don't fulfill the process that the occupier is looking for, and then when they violate that, you don't go after them, which is kind of what I'm involved in right now. We're actually having to do quite a bit of work to do that. We're having to rewrite this ship, a state, so to speak, and put it in its right context. But people don't do it this way, they're going to be dismissed. And here they are. They got dismissed. The Courthouse News Service website has the link to the decision. If I remember this one correctly, they actually talked about the Administrative Procedures Act. That's Title V, and that was the act alone that they had to proceed through, which required the citizens, so-called, these legal entity environmental terrorists in other places, did not have standing because they didn't go to the FBA and file their citizen complaint. Now, for those of you that are paying attention to what I'm saying about the citizen complaint, that's also touching the private attorney general provisions where they have got standing, which brings you to a different power. And don't get lost in all that. There's a very narrow discussion on that as well. But what we're also talking about, in the way I read this decision, the judge lays out what this administrative process is about. And for what I read in doing coordination, which is looked at as a government-to-government condition, not a citizen that has no rights, plebe, you're going to just give us the information that you have and we'll think about it. No, we're at a power level equal to, or better than the agencies, actually, because at a government level, I get to think in terms of 10th Amendment, and so could you. That's why I ask you all to get involved, folks. We have a lot of power if we just start wielding it. At the 10th Amendment level, the power is reserved to the people, the states and the people. You get to speak at that level. Then, if you read between the lines of this decision, for those of you that are really paying attention about this administrative procedure and want to start becoming effective, you can put together how you can apply what didn't happen in this case to somebody that has the power to do otherwise, that complies within the reading of the text of what was going on in error. You can fix that with a different status. And so now let's get to the point of what I'm saying here. If we look at it as a county, for those of you that find your county ineffectual, if you don't understand that there's certain requirements, that if you read between the lines of this discussion, you'd find out that a county conforms with the first point, that the agencies cannot provide an administrative complaint form. And so if you now conform to that one requirement immediately that the judge says has to be conformed to, cha-ching, you're in now. You're into that one slot. Now you're doing the combination of the log. The judge goes to explain another provision that's required underneath administrative procedures that says that NEPA, which all monies that go through the federal government to do a federal action, when it rises to a major federal action, and then we can argue even less, major federal actions require a review through the NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. That you can't use that. This is not unknown to me. We've known this. It's supplemental. It says it right in the act. You can't use NEPA as your private right of action in the case of these legal entities. Well, let's look at that. What then is the statute to comply with that? If it isn't NEPA, you have to look somewhere else. What would be a private right of action to a government, a local county, or anybody who could fit the status, like a mining district? It's proper, not these 501c3 styles, but the actual ones that are acknowledged in the mining law. These government entities, if the way they're perceived as a status as a government, can they find a different statute than NEPA to empower their right of action? And so that's not talked about in the hearing, but if you know, and you look between the lines, you say immediately the answer is sure. Governmental entities can go through another law, 43 U.S.C. 1712. That's the mandate to coordinate. That's the failure of which is the right of action. And by the standard of the supplement of NEPA, now you've cha-ching, you're in. You got the other combination for step number 2. I won't go through the rest. There's 2 more. You just read for these things. Read between the lines, and you can start to develop for, I'm talking in the sense of a county, but if you can establish the status. Let's say you're a grantee, and there's a relationship that's not sovereign and not plebe. Maybe it's an equal, co-equal. You have the power of the government in the conveyance of the land. Now you're co-equals. If you establish that status, you conform to how to read between the lines, and you can advance different than all these legal entities. And so, this was an important case. It was talking about something else. I read between the lines and myself all the time. I look at a lot of things, but so this sounded like a very bad thing, and it is. I mean, if this chemical's no good, they've been given license to continue it until these and the order says so, that the court's going to take hold jurisdiction of this to give the parties time to fulfill the FDA's form, to see what the FDA will do. Notwithstanding, there's no limitation on time; they can stand there and twiddle their thumbs forever. But where the court was going to oversee this, that due process is satisfied to make sure that the parties had it right. So they weren't completely thrown down, but they were admonished that I just wanted you to see. These attorneys will tell you they know what's going on, and they don't have a clue. And they're only doing it within the context of their advantage. In other words, these eco-terrorists, they thought they were going to come in and they're going to use the law to get their big money and big fines and big payment out because of another law that gives them the right to do this and get paid for it, where they won't give any producer this money. These people are just plundering the system, and the government, the other liars in the government, the other party members that we sued to say that you guys are destroying the Republican form of representative government. You all are in cahoots, and you all gave yourself license to steal from we the people. You've destroyed the Republican form of government. That's what our discussion in 2013 was, which they didn't answer. That's default judgment victory, folks. They do it. There's no question in my mind. These people are all together in cahoots to diminish you. And so if you don't, they're already diminishing you. And then you have to discuss this in a certain way. Your lack of discussion on this, they win. It's pretty simple. That I'm trying to expose to you, and I know I'm going fast. That's why I rely on this archive. If you understand about this, it's only 16 pages to read, but if you look at, you know what you're looking at, and you know the law better than these attorneys. There's nothing, I don't think I saw anything that this judge, even without jurisdiction, because it was a USDC court, this judge wasn't wrong in the analysis of how they went through and decided how these people didn't have standing, where the FDA had provided a public comment. That's not available to people that are harmed irreparably in the first instance of a trespass, such as governments, such as grantees, such as any other appropriator. Not by permit, which has no property, but those that you can identify a property in. That could be your autonomy as well. And so, to me, it's an analysis of, again, crickets, folks, on all these bright attorneys, these people that we found out are maybe insane, and they're susceptible to being drug addicts, or leading the charge here, and they missed the door. They ran right into the wall. And the judge lays it out for, wow. No, you just can't go rushing into here. There's a process. And so for me, the communication for my telegraphing to you, what's the thing? The point is there's a formal process that you have to learn. You can't not learn it. And they didn't tell it to us. And I've gone a long way. I can't claim to know it all, but I've learned some of those steps. So I ask you, if you got somewhere to go and you have a question, let me at least put you on the right trailhead, and I'll try and explain to you why I think that's the trailhead, and I'll try and explain to you what I found when I went down that one, why it's relevant to your problem, and then I ask you to trust me enough to put you there and get you running down the path quicker than you're going to find as a dust storm or a tsunami of information on the internet that has actually no relevance to a lot of things. So the blogcaster will have these links for you. Again, I'm not here to tell the news. I really have trouble with that, actually. I'm not a newscaster. I'm behind the woodshed. It's beyond media. I'm trying to. I haven't changed really the context of my broadcast. It's the dose of reality. It's empowering. It's active engagement. That's what happens behind the woodshed, doesn't it? You can pretend everywhere else but behind the woodshed. We're not into the news here, even though I use the so-called news, the notice to us of how it is. And you better come to terms with how it is. I hope for a better day, folks. I'm here every week to hope for there's a better day. I dedicate my life to hope that we can come to a better day. And every week there's someone new that comes along that says, I want to know better. And that may be the only thing I get, because certainly it's not about the amount of listeners that come to the broadcast. Who wants to come behind the woodshed anyway, right? All the pretenders stay away, folks. And then we have to check ourselves that we're worthy of being behind that woodshed to learn those lessons and then go use them. Those things stick with us, so we go and we impose those on the world, not as a force and violence, but as the thing that ought to have been done, the principled way to go that we didn't know. Because this court is so-called agreeing with the allowance of this drug, or this drug for meat production. It's across all. I mean, I could read. It's horrendous what this drug does for beefing up and pigging up, meating up, muscling up the feed that they're feeding you. It doesn't sound like a very good thing, but the judge didn't have before it on a case withstanding the ability to make the judgment that it was no good. And the record that's provided, that's supposed to be the law and honest, is saying that there is no question at this point. So we have to understand this dynamic, because what happens, notwithstanding all these agreements, we hear it, Johnson & Johnson loses battle in lawsuit against woman accusing battery powder causes ovarian cancer. So here's one baby powder, folks. Think about it. Causing ovarian cancer. Johnson & Johnson has lost. A jury says so out of St. Louis, awarded $72 million to the family of a woman from Alabama whose ovarian cancer death was traced to years of using Johnson & Johnson talcum powder. Keep using it, folks. Keep buying Johnson & Johnson. It's a Johnson & Johnson families of companies, folks. This is the business of doing business, and until they get stopped, this is the crime against the people. The presumption of the innocence is on these legal entities that are deemed people. They're not, folks, but this is the story. This is the same story. They said that talcum powder was good for you and didn't cause harm. And this judge will look like, I bet he kind of looks at this whole case and saying, if you'd have done it right, I didn't have to give them a drug that the evidence may be, but I can't lawfully use to stop, should have been stopped. So I'll give a little bit of credit to some of this, that maybe there's just certain ways that we've established this illusion and we've been silent on the part that was harmful, that requires that you take all this time. A woman is dead, didn't know it, over a substance that wasn't known to cause cancer. We now have the proof that it is. Folks, just stop buying Johnson & Johnson. Stop anybody just stop and send the message. Vote. You want to vote? Don't do it as a franchise. Do it with your bucks, folks. Forget the dollar. The bucks. The buck's got to stop with you, folks. This was at some point down the road, all these people, however many else other ovarian cancer cases, and that's the one they could prove. I sit here and think about this stuff. It's all the stuff we trusted when we were growing up. But here's if you needed proof, folks. Here's a proof that something that you use every day can cause a cancer, kill somebody. Their family now has to pick up the tab on that as well until they do win. Look at all the ones maybe that didn't win because they couldn't overcome the attorneys on the other side, and all the other things in life. But here we have Johnson & Johnson peddling some stuff, and we hear the stories later, and I don't want to put this on them because I can't do it, but the thought occurs to me, they probably had some studies that you never found out about that they knew. How many stories have we been hearing out lately about that? That it's kind of surprising that we hear this next title, and I know maybe this is not Monsatan's actual response, but Monsatan stunned. California confirms Roundup will be labeled cancer-causing. I guess that was supposed to be over there on Johnson & Johnson's product, and then they couldn't have been sued. If you understand the dynamic of how this would have worked, folks. Now they're going to put that it's a cancer-causing substance, and then it's okay. This is the limited liability on notice. This is what I talked about. This news is notice. It's giving you notice and limiting the liability of all these entities that could care less about you. But that's the title. Monsatan stunned. California confirms Roundup. This is a story that's been going on. This is not even a new story. I just wanted to bring up that It's been a confirmed condition now. It's known a cancer causer. What they do with this Roundup, it's worse, folks. I'm going to come up with another point here that was I got from Tomato and the UCY chat. He brings up a nice little story if you want to know about what this glyphosate can do to you. We've talked about it on and on and on behind the woodshed. It's a great boiler cleaner if that's what you want. It binds up with minerals really well, but if that gets in your body, it starts binding up with the minerals, folks, and your body can't access them. California just dealt Monsanto a blow as the state's Environmental Protection Agency will now list glyphosate, the toxic main ingredient in the United States, best-selling weed killer Roundup. Keep using it, folks. As known to cause cancer under the Safe Drinking Water and Toxic Enforcement Act of 1986, usually referred to as Proposition 65, its original name, chemicals that cause cancer, birth defects, and other reproductive harm are required to be listed and published by the state. Chemicals also end up on the list if found to be carcinogenic by the International Agency for Research on Cancer, IARC, a branch of the World Health Organization. So there's your international connection to the state. They don't need it, but they're going there. There's a report here about glyphosate is to be a probable carcinogen from that website or that organization. However, California has its own EPA. EPA is not different than the federal. When you start looking at all this, even though they have their state laws, this is another soft law imposition they put in the state, legislated into real act. They don't need a treaty. They figured us out, folks. They figured our system out, and we haven't figured out a way to stop it. Here it is. Roundup is a cancer causer, and they're telling you that, even though Monsanto is shocked, that is going to exonerate them if anybody in the future comes up with some disease they can tie to them for that. This is what the limited liability condition in this government, United States of America, is. It's notice, no different than a speed warning. You don't get the speed warning, no liability. Once you get the speed warning, you're liable. Everything over and in excess. So let's go back as we've been researching a lot of this stuff over and over. Another report comes out. Again, I got this from Tomato and UCY chat here just before the broadcast. This happened to come up. And he was worried about his beer, and that was what kind of caused me to chuckle a little bit. It's everywhere, folks. But this study, you'll get it, a link in the blogcaster or whoever drops it in that knows what I'm talking about. The results of this study indicate the glyphosate Roundup can promote hematological and hepatic alterations, even at a subacute exposure, which could be related to the induction of reactive oxygen species. They're telling you those two words. It affects your blood and it affects your liver, folks, which is really, you don't want that messing with your liver. If you want to have a blood and oxygen exchange condition, you don't want that to happen. So what I would suggest to you, just on the herbal side, consider looking at all the herbal remedies and look for, there's a couple of real good ones. Milk thistle might be one that just popped in my mind. That will help that liver work a lot better and maybe help flush out the known exposure now of glyphosate. It's almost universal, the exposure. Thank you, Tomato, for that, because it came right into this discussion of how dangerous this Monsanto Roundup really is with this glyphosate, which is really just a chemical, but it's what they've used it for, that it's been given innocence to harm you up until now. And now they're going to give it limited liability because it's now noticed to be that. To show you how inverted and nonsensical what we've walked into and been born into is. But anyway, so those of you that are worried, we got to. Where is this stuff then? It's really dangerous. It's dangerous when it gets in your body. It's dangerous when it gets and it's everywhere. Remember, I did the report. There isn't a place I don't think that doesn't have it. This glyphosate, and it just started since 66 when it was invented as a boiler cleaner. So since 1966, it is everywhere, this stuff. And they said earlier, they lied. They said it was supposed to go away. It doesn't. But companies are now looking, and they're finding it. And this might be a good wake-up call when you're all into, for some of us that are into recreational aspects of TV and those things that are those game shows that are in real life game shows that they have us go to, like football and racing around a circle in a car and all that kind of interesting stuff, and get our attention on that instead of what should be. Then along with that is your beer and chips and horrors, folks. German beer industry, the whole industry now, in shock over glyphosate contamination, if you think it's only limited to German beer industry. The Munich Environmental Institute has released shocking results Thursday of a laboratory testing it has completed on 14 of the most sold beers in Germany. The probable carcinogen, the world's most used herbicide, glyphosate, was found in all 14 beers tested. And why I thought that was a little bit of a chuckle, because Tomatoes said right after he posted the last little link here we talked about the evaluation of its harm it does to people, he was going to go over he was talking about maybe drinking some more beer. And I had to throw that little link in ahead of the broadcast to say, be careful, it's in beer too. So, it's everywhere, folks. So before you get off thinking that you're going to get away from this, and you find out that it's going to affect your blood and your liver and who knows all, there's all kinds of stuff going on. Let them continue to use this chemical, and do it wrong when you go to try and stop it, like the Sierra Club just did, and let them continue to use something that's is being shown more and more to be really a poison in the world for everything. Glyphosate contamination in beer. You think it's only in Germany. So now as you run out of the stores, and you're going to be looking now, where do you go? And you've been using your little iPhone to see what better deal you're going to have, and who doesn't have German beer now? Or you don't think that Coors going to have that problem as well, or Budweiser? I think Budweiser Light has a little bit less. There's a company out there that's going to keep track of all your decisions about all this stuff. And now I'm beginning to wonder again, as they pull big data together, this can be also picked up by these companies to identify your exposure as well to certain things. That a Foursquare will tell businesses when their ads bring you into a store. An actual one, brick and mortar. They're utilizing technology in apps now to collect up the information as you walk around and do certain purchases. They're getting it's going to be I'll just read it. Foursquare announced a new product today that should help brick and mortar advertisers measure the effectiveness of their campaigns. Now, see, this is for ads, but I'm thinking, well, a government or a Monsanto can use it to keep track of their accumulating harm. That might be fed on over to big biopharma, and maybe you get a text coupon for a doctor. You need to go into the doctor, and you need to check yourself out for this so we can give you some more medications. And here's another coupon for that pharmacological remedy that we have for you to keep you stuck in our clutches. But here's Foursquare's announced a new product that would help brick and mortar advertisers measure the effectiveness of their campaigns. The company has already been expanding the ad side of the business. For example, launching a new ad targeting product last year and recently bringing a CEO, Jeff Gluck, to grow its enterprise tools. My bottom line on all this, without reading more, this is in your iPhone. This is this tracking technology. And what was astonishing to me is how many have agreed to be the guinea pig to this process. 1.3 million people without any at all gift, impetus, other than just use this, agreed to be tracked wherever they go. And I just shake my head, folks. We're done. We're screwed. SCROD. 1.3 million did it without any pressure, folks. Without any pressure at all to do so. They just, go ahead. I'm good. Track me. We're in some hurt here, because I don't know if your mind should be able to go to the next point. They have a lot of psychological pressure they put on us over time, and they'll get the bulk of us. That they're doing tracking with where you do business and when, how, what you respond to. They're having to look at a lot of information on your iPhone, your private phone. I, meaning you, your phone. It's already built in, actually. They're just tapping these different things, that they become the central repository of this big data. Then I told you, this is probably going to be a worse issue than NSA, actually. That this company is going to be keeping track. I can tell you, I don't think it's going to be limited to the ads. I think it's going to be limited to companies. It's not going to be limited. All companies will have access for whatever their needs are, even as Monsanto might need to keep track. And so here's the thing. They're getting you in what you need. They get you going down to the store. They track you wherever you go. Right now, they're in the voluntary. I'm suggesting to you the pressure comes on, and it's way worse at some level. In fact, I had some scenarios in my head that escape me right now on how, I've heard it before, how they get people into agreeing. I mean, look at Windows 10 right now, folks. I mean, you can't even not agree. And then they lie about it. You got a story I might get to or not. I don't know. I got so many things to talk about. When the Department of Defense is agreeing to take on Windows 10 right now, when it is known to be a malware, you know that's part of the plan, folks. This Foursquare company is part and parcel, if not now, in the future. They gave you notice, it's here. It's completely compliant with what I've told you, a quick little idea. This is years and years ago. All of a sudden on one web page in the margins were all these neat inventions that were in the new tech inventions. And it was almost an instantaneous thought. I looked at all these, it was like 6 of them. 6 new inventions at the time. Maybe 10 years ago. And I said, man, with that technology, you going down a road, you go across an intersection, they'll know exactly where you are. They'll know when the light turned red. They'll know that you did pass through, or they can make it up, that you passed through on a red. Before you get past that intersection, the technology would also allow the city or the jurisdiction to go into your bank account, extract the money for the fine, send you a receipt, and then send you a voicemail that said, thank you for doing business with this jurisdiction, before you got through the intersection. Foursquare technology is that, folks. It's not that far. It was then before. They're just now bringing it out as a compact business plan. This extended within a year or two. I noticed another technology. I said, well, by the time you get through that intersection now we've seen it happen, and I got more reports about this. Getting you from the sky, these drones. If you didn't have money in your bank by the time you got to the other side of the intersection on a red light, and the city couldn't extract from the bank account your fine and fee and tax and your exaction of every kind, a drone would take you out. You just disappear. You're just useless eater. And then a cleanup crew would come, and they'd tax your estate for cleaning up your remains. All automatically. Okay, that all happened in an instant many years ago. I think the technology's coming. That may have not been so far-fetched, actually. So, continue engaging with big data. Continue engaging in the systems that provide information to big data. Continue voting with your buck. Continue voting with your silence, folks. Because it's all right here for us to see how deleterious the future will be if we remain crickets. What happens to you? And so what's one of the answers to all this? Is you start participating. And I don't even know if I'm going to get to these stories anymore. I got them all lined up. I don't know if I'm going to get to them. I understand that Linux Skype got shut down. And I've been telling you, folks, stop. It's not just, see, for me, it's important that I don't let other people know what I do. Most of you maybe aren't doing things that are that level. I don't know. So I don't want them knowing my stuff I do. And I'm not perfect on that. I still have other accounts that I know they can get some of the emails, but I can only do so much. But here's another thing, that they shut you down. You see the plan. Microsoft wants the Linux people to be hurt. You're not using their service. Folks, use that. Like I use digital TV. I don't watch TV no more. I haven't watched TV since they went digital. I don't have a digital TV and I won't go pay it. I don't have the money to go buy one. Wouldn't want it anyway. Cut the ties. Stop voting with your use. Why use the service and give them credit? Whether they know what I'm going to say or not. It's in some regard that was kind of irrelevant to your need. But why vote with your use? Why give them credit? Oh, look what I've got all the people. Because of what? Herd mentality. Please, let's get some principle in us at least. There's a lot of alternatives. I go on my broadcaster page, Blogcaster. Talks is an alternative. No one wants to go there. I don't know why. It looks really similar to to Skype. I can't say that Skype's some superior utility program either, because it has all kinds of problems. There's Jitsi as well. I got both those links on my blogcaster. RealLibertyMedia.com's got to piss off the NSA. It's a part of the list. It's what I have listed on the blogcaster. It's an article. You can read it. It tells you exactly how to do I think it's the Jitsi. But they're cutting you out and funneling you in to where they want the pigs to feed off their feed. And companies like this Foursquare are there to monitor your activity. And it isn't going to be so innocuous as, we get to give you the best deal when you walk in the store, like a Minority Report. You walk by a screen, and all of a sudden what goes on the screen is what you've been researching or thinking about for the last week, inducing you into some subliminal action, a subliminal thought to cause an action. So what do? Well, you got to stop voting with your use. Stop voting by utilizing what they have to offer. And those of you in Canuckistan may be into this. Very interesting development, it seems to me. It's when along the lines of you're finding out that everything's grown for you has these chemicals all over it. And this is shocking to me. I don't know if you folks that are into marijuana, cannabis, you really have to look at how these growers are doing this. I didn't realize how bad the pesticide problem is with cannabis. So you really have to pay attention not to buy into these people that would put profit above product and quality. It's very interesting. In Canuckistan, Canadian medical marijuana users have right to grow. Federal judge rules. Now, this is an arbitrary line between medical marijuana and not. However, let's not work there. In Canuckistan, it's the federal judge. Whether or not this goes on there in the appeal process, I don't know. But right now, medical marijuana users have the right to grow, so-called. And this was one story that came up that I thought was important. It's not important to me somehow, because I keep telling you, this is never really. I know lots of people have 420 hour, and I guess we're coming close to that in a few more minutes. Those of you, I guess, get ready. 7 minutes, folks, get ready. But for me, it wasn't ever a big deal. I look at it more like any herb, and then I started to find out with the more of the truth coming out on the internet that it really is a useful thing. Not that I'm still ignorant about that. What I'm saying is, a number of years ago, that this is an ongoing crime. What's happening? That a judge says in Canuckistan, under medical marijuana, you have a right to grow. Folks, don't go buy it. Grow it. When they get this worked out for the states, grow it, folks. You don't need to go and get your iPhone to make an order to go down to your local dispensary to get the stuff you don't know has got pesticides all over it. Maybe high profit margins, whatever, that also is tracking your actions, which you walk by some store and some countertop will turn into a TV screen and ask and offer you a coupon for the next ounce you're going to think about getting. We're talking medical now. You don't participate in it, folks. So Canuckistan is this medical marijuana thing is moving over. You have a so-called right to grow. What happened to it before? I don't know. But one guy says it's okay now. Now let's go back to that beer, tomato. UCY.TV, I think it was. Here, this one's for you. It's for all of those of you that are into the brew and like to brew. Actually, we have no reason to be actually being so reliant and dependent on these these companies. None whatsoever. That for those of you that brew or drink brew, right in time, it's how fortuitous. A company, BrewDog, dumps their entire brew recipe list on the internet as open source. So you don't have to go buy them German beers no more if they have in their list 215 cheers worth, 215 different recipes. And if you've ever brewed, you realize a good recipe can be hard to find, and and hard to and it's a skill, literally a skill, to make it work. It's an art. I don't mean artifice. I mean it's really a talent. Making wine, vintning wines, the same way. So there's a little bit of skill in paying attention to this, but everybody can do this. And now you got 215 popular recipes to make your own. And they even talk. There's a video. I got 3 links for you to go. I thought this was pretty neat because recipes are really hard to find, and the secrets about how to make it just like the BrewDog does back in Europe, in England. They talk about what type of barrel they put it in. They even talk about, they said in the video that if they throw in a little bit of hot chili pepper, they tell you they do that. So you learn how to do this at a quality level. And they're dumping that on for free. Right at the time we're finding out German beer industry is shocked over the glyphosate that's involved. So, which means that you're also going to have to learn how to grow your hops, which for those of you in cannabis will know it's the same type of family. So while you're growing a little bit of marijuana for your medical purposes until we get this thing worked out that it should be a plant that has no criminality to it whatsoever, you can also grow yourself some hops. Maybe you can even do some neat stuff like cross graft them and see how that works. But here it is. We don't need to. There's nothing out there, folks, with the internet. This was a big deal with 215 private recipe given to you. I thought that was a good gift, fantastic gift for people. If you've ever done it, you realize that the recipes are important. That right in time to tell us we have it to do. We're around each other to help each other. That if you are so inclined, like Tomato was saying earlier in the chat, I'm going to need to go drink a beer on this one about the glyphosate. And then you find out that glyphosate's in that beer you're drinking, you may have to step up and be responsible for your own self in that regard, and the tools are there for you to do it. But if you're going to utilize that, be very careful. You don't want to just go out and be a nuisance with yourself. And that said, and the fact that most everybody has a driver's license to say they're in commerce to use the highways instead of the right that they have, and that the Bar Association is there to beat you down if you try to do otherwise. As we're identifying what they do in the process is also money laundering. It's racketeering. You have to go by the elements and work it out. But at least Kansas is bringing it out. A very interesting discussion. If you've drank a little bit of beer, a little bit too much, and you're out on the road, which I would say maybe you shouldn't, but in Kansas, and apparently more than just Toto too, a DUI law that makes test refusal a crime is ruled unconstitutional. DUI law that makes test refusal a crime is ruled unconstitutional. So this is another one of those things that was presumed to be law until it took all these years to show that it wasn't, and all these people got harmed. Is another product liability thing that we have to overthrow. This presumption that the court, the state, any longer is consistent with the law constitutionally needs to be denounced, thrown down, and changed for something that only laws that pass judicial muster can be passed. Because of all the harm this kind of a law did, you have to understand this is contrary even to implied consent. You have to understand what's going on here. Even over implied consent, the refusal cannot be used to charge you an extra crime. Kansas Supreme Court says drivers cannot be prosecuted for turning down a Dewey test, or Dewey tests, any one of them, if there is no warrant. And what I say last week, the judge was saying, I'm not gonna take this test. The drunk judge going to traffic court. I'm not gonna take those tests. I said, court, listen, folks, she's telling you a secret. And so now it's shown you can't be charged extra, at least in Kansas, Toto. Kansans who refuse to submit to a breath or blood test in DUI investigations cannot be criminally prosecuted for the refusal. The state Supreme Court ruled Friday. The court found unconstitutional a state law making it a crime to refuse such tests when no court-ordered warrant exists. In the 6-1 ruling, pretty unanimous there, The court found that the tests were, in essence, searches, and the law punishes people for exercising their constitutional right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. What about testifying against yourself? What about all kinds of stuff? But they limited it to, I don't even know why this is a question, but this is what they had to say. This is what they finally had to rule. Again, as we found in the mining and the grantees, the mineral estate grantees at the state capitol, they will enact ex post facto laws and bills of attainder all the time, and nobody can stop that. Nobody has yet. So we had to sue it as a blanket coverage. You're being harmed by this presumption of right. You're being harmed by the presumption of innocence. You're being harmed by the presumption that these corporations are people too. You're being harmed that they can do no wrong. They're being harmed that their processes to get you there can do no wrong. You're being harmed even by the thing I was telling you that you have to speak to the occupier in a certain way. You're being harmed, and that's okay. These are all licenses given by the government to harm you. The courts and the system is really just a big pressure valve, giving you thought that you think you have a right to do some stuff. And we don't learn what we need to do to really make it effective a lot quicker. Under Kansas law, anyone who operates a motor vehicle in the state has given implied consent to submit to such testing. But the court ruled that the implied consent is not irrevocable, and withdrawal of that consent cannot be criminally published. If that doesn't speak to a rescission, first of all, and an implied reservation in the application, folks, you're not paying attention. These are remedies right here that you have. You have consent every moment, apparently, doesn't it say here? Quote, once a suspect withdraws consent, whether it be express consent or implied under the statute, a search based on consent cannot proceed. The state's compelling interest in combating drunken driving and prosecuting DUI offenders does not outweigh the fundamental individual rights protected by the Constitution, according to Friday's opinion. Well, if that's the case, folks, if you have a right to use the highways that's not encumbered by the Motor Vehicle Code, isn't that another one that you can step up? Maybe, impliedly, they're actually pointing to that too. I don't know. That doesn't say. I'm telling you, you have another one. There's a right. Your highway law, forget your Motor Vehicle Code. Your highway law has underlying grant power. That's supposed to be fundamentally protected. That I would be, we do, wherever we, not necessarily on Deweys, I don't do that too much, but again, and it's only to the limit that someone wants to do it. A lot of times the people that are dysfunctional don't follow through anyway, and so it's a lot of waste of time. That's another thing that be careful of. You get involved with people that can't follow through, you're going to waste a lot of time. I've wasted years on issues, folks, trying to help someone who just wouldn't help themselves. And at some point, what a disappointment, but you have to cut ties. But for you, by you asserting your rights, your withdrawal of consent is always, apparently by this case, and if you can articulate, if you have a word in your mouth over your constitutionally protected right, which I am suggesting to you is the use of the highway obligation by the state for the disposal of that area that you were traveling down for the use of a highway as a matter of right, which cannot be challenged by the state ever. It says it right in the Enabling Acts or the Emission Acts. For it never can challenge the disposal of the United States. You go there, you have not just a constitutional right, but a fiduciary obligation in the state that cannot be trespassed. That it says you have consent at every time, at all times. The refusal law was classified either as a misdemeanor or felony depending on how many times an individual had been charged with violating it. But that can't be used. It's no good. They can only go after whether the evidence they get from you on what they suspect is a Dewey. But I'm telling you that's underneath the Motor Vehicle Code. And what if you're not there? But what if you've committed yourself to say you are there when you hand them the evidence of an application of the commercial application you filled out prior to be subject to the law, which is your license, the so-called license. It's that piece. It's evidence. It's not even the license. It's evidence that you filled out the application to be treated as a commerce entity. So you may imbibe real well with your beer. You might even find yourself on the street, which, folks, don't be irresponsible that way. Really, be responsible to people. But if you find yourself in a condition, even if they're lying, folks, this is the most important part, you don't allow them to take the evidence they need or give them the opportunity to give you a bad test, folks. That's the other thing. You can, now again, in Kansas, I don't know if this is going to be tested elsewhere, but in Kansas, they're saying that's an additional search that you're withholding of consent. Your action to withhold consent. That's not being a cricket here. It's not being silent. It's actively withholding your consent. Is not being a cricket. Is enough that they can't use that as a crime against you. And this is going to be applicable in lots of places that are so-called privileges given to people. Where I'll just add that where you can show an alternative reality. What I expose to you is the obligations and duties between Congress and the states, which neither party can change in the disposal laws of using the highways, use of the land, use of the water. If you're lawful in all those, they can't make a crime out of that. Important link, important discussion, important thoughts to have about that. Now, in the face of the corruption, these people, these officers that are getting people for Deweys and have fabricated this and agreed to the fabrication of you're in commerce, and the commerce can be reduced to some fine, which is money they can pull from you. They can get involved. You can get yourself involved. You might not be voting with your bucks, and you'll be doing all your own stuff, and you could be thinking that you're a sovereign citizen. And you get out in the street and you find out how fast that's going to be beat out of you. And how big an oxymoron that was. But you get collected up, and you get collected up because you didn't find out that maybe the marijuana, the cannabis you could grow for your own health, you decided to go down the license path and utilize certified doctors and utilize the pharmacology that's been licensed to kill you and cause whatever they want to do with immunity, or until you're noticed. A 45-year-old man, Rex Iverson, died in prison on January 23rd, 2016 after being incarcerated on a $350 bench warrant for failing to pay a court-ordered civil judgment. In 2013, the Trentman Justice Court had issued a $2,377 judgment against Iverson for a Christmas Eve 2013 ambulance bill. Iverson died, folks, medical condition, debt prisoner, and he dies in jail. They're supposed to take care of you, right? They don't care about you. It's about this fiscal plunder. So when we have all these courts that are giving license to all this plunder against you, understand it could mean this, that you die as a debt prisoner, which is supposed to be outlawed. Understand this is also a civil debt against a corporation. Iverson died in Box Elder County holding cell while the county deputies were absent preparing his booking process. When the deputies returned, they found Iverson unresponsive. The death is currently under investigation by the Northern Utah Critical Incident Investigative Team, but foul play is not suspected. Folks, they had him in. That's foul play, period. But now, see, he's dead. He's not going to be able to argue any of this kind of nonsense about how they mistreated him. His family, such that he might be able to, but he's not around. And so this is the life and death decisions that the government has given itself license to do in its favor, which is presumed okay. And we can remain crickets on all this, or we can start to understand how comprehensive the crime is against us, and each one of us take a little piece of it. When you start seeing that the court system is this pressure valve on one level, at one side, I mean, there's lots of little pressure valves. It's one of them. And it doesn't mean you good. It actually means to diminish and diffuse your energy. And that they use that on the other side to accelerate and compress the exaction. Remember, the extortion against you. At some point, you can't be okay with that. And at some point, you have to figure out where in there you want to really stop it or change it. Because the government deals in evil. Just evil. You can't tell me that allowing a presumption of innocence on vaccines that are known to harm, with industry information available that tells you that you can be harmed, that the vaccines themselves are spreading the harm, that you give those people immunity for harm. Has to be evil. That you go in on some money that you owe in a country that's supposed to be the wealthiest in the country in the world, that is a debt system anyway. They actually should have given this guy a medal. He was in debt. They could have actually bonded that and insured it and made another derivative from it, folks. This is the stupidity and the heinousness of this crime. Government does this all the time. But see, they haven't taught you how to be that legal people. And then you thought their courts were okay. But you die in jail on a medical problem. I suppose they're taking back what they gave him, right? If he would have died, if he wouldn't have paid for it in cash in the beginning, I guess he would have died the time in 2013, right? But they would have died on the side of the street because the ambulance wouldn't have taken him away. You understand that's what we're talking about? They're talking about a cab ride. So the government sits in as a licensee to its own crimes. I don't know why that's all right with people. The United States is willing to kill you and call it good. Call it, no culpability here. And we see it over and over. So I tell you, the mirror, wherever you see the governments operating elsewhere, they're doing it where you are. And this is a report to tell us, first of all, I wanted to know, why are we there doing that? But in fact, it tells us that we're there doing that, and what seems to be okay to do there doing that I have to tell you that they're doing that here, and that's okay. I've just kind of gone through an hour and a half of that. The government gives itself license to hurt you. Start at Title 50, the United States Code. Understand it's a financial construct that it's protecting. This bigger thing that goes on, the war against you is a war against everyone, and it is there. It's not something that it's not happening. It's not something that's not something you can really turn your head away from, because one day you may find yourself in these straits where these people in costume believe they have authority and power to harm you, and the government that employs them has given them that power, and the institutions that do that have given them the authority because a big gang has said so. Not just cause, folks. Not just cause. Just cause. How many times do I say this? It's all right here. I try not to repeat myself a lot because I know it'd be boring, but really, the same stuff could be said over and over. But here we have it, folks. 20 dead. You want to talk about the government dealing in stuff that's killing people? And oops. 20 dead, 200 hospitalized after reports of U.S. lab leaks deadly virus in Ukraine. This is a little bit longer, older story here that I'm just getting to throw in to show you. What's the United States doing with a deadly virus in Ukraine? They have no compunction. They have no moral revulsion to not be there. That if they'll do it there, they're doing it to you. Amid the so-called ceasefire in Ukraine, not down in Syria, which is on, apparently, and doing somewhat well in Syria. In Ukraine, yet an ongoing shelling in many regions, the Donbass news agency reports that more than 20 Ukrainian soldiers have died and 200 soldiers were hospitalized after an apparent leak of a deadly virus called California flu from a U.S. lab near the city of Kharkov. Do I need to read more? The United States government, what's they're doing over in Ukraine with the California flu? Did you even know there was such a thing, folks? Is that going to be the next Zika-zilla, the next Ebola? What's the United States doing there, and why are they messing with this stuff? They're not bashful to kill y'all. It's that simple. It's got to go beyond, oh, I know that, too. You have to really get involved with how that works and maybe step up where you can and how you're going to make that not be so good, and you're not going to take it no more. International is a little bit farther away from us, but the CDC not so much, and your local nurses in schools and Walmarts that sell shots not so much again, and the ignorance that goes around these things and the harm that's allowed underneath that ignorance is not either. That you can become a voice to expose what the government's willing to do to people and not sound like a lunatic doing it. And speaking back over the war that's going on in Ukraine and the war and the ceasefires and all that stuff that's going on, the United States is us, folks. I don't even know why that seems to have fallen from the discussion anymore. All these wars is us, folks. It's either the United States, through proxy or as guided by Israel. Absolutely. But why don't you hear too much about Israel also? It's like the guy behind the ruler. You don't hear about the guy standing behind the ruler that actually makes all the decisions. Valerie Jarrett. Syria war. U.S. and Russia agreed a truce to start on a weekend, and it started, and apparently it's holding up relatively well. And so the videos I've been watching, the people are really happy. They're actually saying maybe this will cause the refugees to come back. So here it was, like the little boy was saying, stop bombing my home and I can go back. And so the Russians have led the charge to kind of get this ceasefire going. I can see, I won't talk a lot about it, I can see why they're doing that, and I can see how the dynamic's working in some regards. We'll see how good it is, but they're also, I think Russia has done a good, they actually have gotten what they insisted on originally. The United States is really out of position here, although the United States is trying to take some initiative, they claim, by saying, well, if this doesn't work, the plan B is to split Syria. Folks, United States and through Kerry, there is no plan B for the United States. Remember, the qualified one says we have no plan. If you have no plan, you can't have a plan B. You got to have a plan A first. And so their discussion is on the heels of Russia's suggestion of a ceasefire and how they're trying to mitigate all that's going on there. I can see some pretty good genius behind the way that works, even though it doesn't look on the surface. There's a big question as to why. I can see why in one regard, but the United States is kind of out of it, that they're already claiming there's a plan B if this doesn't fail, not putting their shoulder to the wagon of success for the plan that Russia came up with, which is actually plan B, because plan A was Russia coming in and kicking everybody's out and then stabilizing the area. That's actually plan B is to stabilize. Actually, it's what the UN is supposed to be doing. They go in and they cause enough harm to the aggressor, and then they bring peace to bring in humanitarian aid to feed people. And the United States ain't behind that. No, there's going to be a plan B already. So a truce has started. The reports are there is some fighting, but it's not. Most of it's shut down at this point. Even Russia stopped flying over bombs, even though there's some videos that claim without proof that there are jets still flying. And again, the ceasefire was not against everybody. The ceasefire was only against those people that were going to step up and call themselves moderates, that were not going to be is an al-CIA duh. That war still goes. And so Russia's got himself back in, and they wanted to know where the moderates that were the United States mercenaries, they wanted to know where they were, and the United States wouldn't tell them. Now the Russians have got a truce that says, you tell us, or else you're going to be an is, and you're going to be an is us, and you're going to be an al-CIA duh, and we're going to start bombing you again. And so I think they did a pretty good thing there to get this moving along. As this, again, the refugee throw-out process, I told you, Agenda 2030 predicts refugees. It predicts refugees. It plans for them. I read all that. This is not even a question. Why everybody's out in the world talking about, oh, these refugees is a problem. No, that's the plan, folks. I may not be privy on the result. I can tell you on the uptake that that's the plan. and they're utilizing it. It's a plan. It's not an error. It's not a mistake. It's the plan in full swing. Why the United States says there's a plan B, we're going to divide Syria. They've been doing that's the whole thing. That they're out of it. But these refugees are a serious problem. Showing this shows you now that they're pressing on the European Union. This is another false idea over Europe, which was another kind of construction that was a divisive type of thing. But now the EU is saying they're going to break underneath this new offensive against the EU. The statement being, we are headed into anarchy. Official says EU will completely break down in 10 days. Now, I'm not sure about the EU actually breaking down, but they know. Norwegian PM Erna Solberg doesn't have to skirt her country's responsibilities under the Geneva Convention, and she doesn't want to trample over human rights either, but she will if she has to. There's the human rights being subject to the state's needs. And so I won't read more. The point is that they're seeing anarchy come on them. It's complete internal. It's the chaos inside democracy. It's now risen to a point, the plan now in fulfillment has risen to a point that it abject anarchy from the government's perspective. If you want to know what anarchy is, look at Syria. You want to know, look at all the factions inside that democracy. You want to see what anarchy is? Take the word of this PM, the Prime Minister or whatever, parliamentary member or whatever the heck it is. It's chaos inside of a society. And it's a plan, folks. If you didn't understand the financial construction and the importance of how this thing rolls down and the invasion of people that also are in need, cause created where there was no cause, just cause, no just cause, fabricated, is us done it, folks. Underneath a bigger plan that affects a larger agenda, even the trite little Agenda 21, that's the tool. If you want to start seeing, folks, what problems can happen, what the EU might be looking as their anarchy, we now jump over, and this is kind of, I don't know many, since I don't get the news, and I only got my little internet view, I don't know that many people who is talking about this, but I did get this report that I thought was important, because the gentleman who's writing is saying there is no response from the media. The game changed in Venezuela last night, and the international media is asleep at the switch. There's a compelling view by somebody in Venezuela of what's happening in slow motion unraveling of what goes on with this economic chaos, disorder, and when people, you need to eat, and what a bunch of people can do when they need to eat, when they need the basic necessities. Look to Venezuela if you haven't heard of it. I've got the link. You can see it. You can read on and on. This guy's talking all over the place. What happened overnight, folks, because they didn't see it even coming this quick. The literal chaos that comes upon a whole country overnight. This is the United States at some point if we're not careful. And why I'm a little concerned, I keep hearing now reports of how many guns are in the country. And there was a little map, and they were showing how all the states now have so many guns equating to other nations. California has almost as many guns as China, to totality of China. They have the most. New York is second, I think. Texas is third. They have guns enough that they would actually have more guns than whole countries. And my observation was, as I posted in the worldtruth.org social network thingy there, that there's so much going on in that I don't even understand what's all available at worldtruth.org. It's like Facebook, but I don't know. They got all kinds of stuff going on. I can't even keep up with it. But there's this little posting script I get to do with. I understand that part. And I put in this story, this type of a story. I hope in the United States with all these guns, I hope we resist the urge to go after each other in this divide and conquer proxy war world we live in. very serious here, folks. They are getting us to hurt each other in this country, the United States. They'll do it to us elsewhere as well. Our human frailty is such that it's exploitable. Overnight, Venezuela is turned into this chaos state. The government couldn't do it. Socialist policies couldn't do it. The price of oil put pressure. They couldn't get the flows of funds that they need to do. The story on how this is notice of how overnight your nation can change, and the people are driving it out of desperation, folks. I think it was Venezuela as well, if it wasn't some other South American country, just the days before that. They were picketing they were demonstrating and protesting because the price of the bus tickets went up. People could no longer go to what little work they had. Stuff happens overnight, folks. You have to understand this dynamic. The United States people, the people of the United States have no clue. Have no clue. Again, I'll throw it out there. The Jefferson Mining District, back when, I could see, when the society fails, you have to have some structure for people to focus in on. A mining district was always that. You have to have that sense about there's a bigger thing going on. You speak to those principles. You don't let yourself be urged into this violent character, notwithstanding your needs, because that's been imposed too. It's been worked that way. The governments around you have been given license to hurt you to do that. And you're going to get to the point, by being crickets, that overnight your country is changed to a point you can't resolve it, and nothing but destruction starts to happen. You want anarchy? You want to know what it is? Look at Syria. Look at what the EU is talking about. This is societies that have chaos imposed into them. That's the definition beyond mind of man what anarchy is, not the new age one that everyone keeps coming up with. And so what do people allow? We got to the story here 2 weeks ago. France declares, I predicted this one coming, and here's what happens, folks. French declares state of emergency laws to become part of the Constitution. When you live under necessity, it's over, folks. There's no Constitution. I asked right away, what's the purpose of the Constitution then? We live that way in the United States if anybody cared to look really carefully. I showed it to you in NDAA again, but it happened before that. United States is under emergency rule, and no one seems to want to pay attention to that. When they removed most war declarations, they didn't remove the Trading with the Enemy Act, which also, I told you, underpins Title 50, which is the government's license to hurt you and get away with it for financial and monetary reasons, fiscal reasons. That France declares state of emergency under the Constitution. I'm asking you folks, where's your Constitution? When the government of the United States went to NDAA and indefinite detention without due process, extrajudicial, where's your Constitution, folks? Folks, wake up. Fascinating what happens to a country. As soon as that's mentioned, 2 weeks later, we get this little story. I can't play it for you, but cricket, ratatouille, insect pasta takes off in France. It's Soylent Brown, folks. It's you, man. Not weeks after this story that there's no system of emergency over France, the crickets go to become flour in pasta. Pasta, as the UK reporter pronounced it, pasta. Cricket ratatouille is what you're going to become, folks, if you don't step up. Insect pasta. Tastes good, the guy says. I wish I could play it, but I can't. I don't want to tax my system too much. It's only a few minutes. You get the link. It's about 1:40. It tells you what you're going to do. Crickets, folks. Soylent Brown. It's not Soylent Green. That was to get you off on the point. It's you in that pasta. These crickets that you is. And the grasshoppers we haven't talked about yet. The plague that comes farther. Haven't even touched that part of the cricket problem either. But having enough trouble with the cricket population. Keep it up, folks. Keep being crickets. And you're watching, they're telling us in the notice, the news, how it works and how fast the destruction happens and how helpless you are to stop it and how easy it is for you to start fighting amongst yourself with all them guns you got. Boy, was this a setup or what? These people are brilliant against us. Brilliant against us. International imposition, and we were supposed to have a constitution, didn't know it was ended way back when. NDAA was just I told you folks, the unqualified one was the symbol of our takedown. We were going to go down when he was in here. I told you that before he got into office. I said he was going to be president because he looked like Roosevelt and Lincoln and on steroids. And then we got this new group of politics coming up. Oh, there's a big sideshow going on. Oh, we got the Trump and the Hitlery and the Byrne. What a bunch of nonsense. But we're going to rally up against some guy that looks so far left to Hillary, it's scary. I'm crickets, folks. We're doing it. We're watching it. If nothing else, folks, sit back. If you find at some point, just sit back and smile that you see the nonsense going on. So be careful. That goes too far. You might get a bullet in your head, someone thinking you got something that they don't, and they've got felt out that feel that your opinion on something is just enough radical that you need to be gone. This is the danger of kind of going off and talking to people, the Muslims and the blacks and the browns and the greens and the purples and the fur lovers and the fur haters and all this and the gender problems. Folks, I told you legal is gender neutral. Why do we have a gender issue in legal? Are we that absent, folks? I'm believing to think that we are. And again, cricket ratatory. This is where we're going. Soylent Brown. And you'll see it. Go when you see this little video, you'll see it. It doesn't come out green, folks. It comes out brown. And it's tasty too. Talked about water, folks. Crickets need water. And I told you that internationally they got us over a barrel. As fish in the barrel, and they're going to start shooting them. In fact, they're going to get us to shoot ourselves, apparently. Flint was the tip of the iceberg. Mississippi tap water is toxic. Government warns not to use it. I told you, I predicted that, folks, that you're going to find this all over the place. Just need to let you know about it. Don't need to. The crickets are getting dirty water, okay? Nobody seems to know how to hold any of these people accountable. It's really phenomenal to me. Well, we'll protest in the streets. Trump will take and throw water all over the stage. Boy, I bet a bunch of people up in Michigan sure would have liked to have that bottle without in that bottle, even with the plastic chemicals that effeminate them and give them other hardships and health hardships. They'd have loved that little clear bit of water. He's throwing it all over the stage. This is the kind of clowns we have, folks. You're looking at the alternative reality show in real life. That's what we're living through. So crickets need water, but you're going to get dirty water. In Mississippi now. It's in Florida. I told you you're going to find it's lots of places. No different than Fukushima exposed to us how the government was going to cover up the domestic radiation problem. I have not been wrong on that yet. Everything is still pointing to it, and Fukushima has nothing to do with any of it. And yet we keep wanting to be focused on all this irrelevant stuff that's not really the point. And if you think that what's coming on us in the United States is not nuts, and that we not have a reflection of what's going on and what chaos can mean, let's just take it from the people that are over there, given the license by the people being crickets over there as well, when they live underneath these regimes that are all military. Egypt sentenced 4-year-old to life in prison for murder is a notice to you, folks, of how nuts it's starting to go. Oh, they throw it over there in Egypt. But have you noticed in the country United States and a lot of other places how much lower the age goes for legal culpability anymore? Let me also throw in a more sick proposition for you. Child services and children being issued out as human trafficking. Child services are servicing men and women. They lower that age down to all of a sudden man-boy association becomes relevant in your life. Understand how many dimensions are moving here when you see the 4-year-old life in prison, because the system of the government doesn't understand its own system. But it doesn't care. No one says, wait a minute, we have a problem. Why? Because they're all just doing their job. Why? Because the crickets. No one stepped up at all to stop the nonsense when it started. Nobody nipped it in the bud. How much more are we going to take? You think this is ridiculous? 4-year-old sentenced to life in prison, only in Egypt. Folks, it's around the corner. You're not looking at the child necessarily, this little one in life in prison. You're looking at the system that don't care about you. With people who don't think about that, who have authority all over their body in costume, that will dare to come against you just cause, folks. Just cause you've been a cricket. But they don't care. They're going to make some pasta out of you. I got the report right there. It comes right out of France. As soon as this emergency happened, all of a sudden they got a bunch of new crickets. Where'd those crickets come from, folks? You think they got it from nowhere? Soylent Brown, folks. Taking away all your rights. Making nonsense on stuff, taking away a life of a 4-year-old. The 4-year-old was 2 when an accident happened, and they didn't understand it had to be some paperwork snafu. They convicted him in absentia. But don't worry. You don't think it's coming into your country. You don't think that you think you have these constitutional rights. You think that there's protections. You think you have all that. You do have some of those, but folks, you got to get to them a whole different way. And here's one less way you're going to be able to do it, where the state Supreme Court in the United States of America rules cops no longer need a warrant to enter homes and seize evidence. We knew this was here. We knew it was coming, but now it's certain. The Wisconsin Supreme Court just dealt a death blow to the Fourth Amendment, which is supposed to protect citizens against unreasonable search and seizures. What's more, the decision was made by a single newly appointed judge who was not even present when the arguments were made in court. Now, I don't know how much this is going to last, this case, but I got to it too late. I might actually pick this up for next week. Here's a little bit of an analysis that has to go here. Folks, the incremental crime, organized crime we call government, is all over you. And they've just told you what they're willing to make you into. Cricket pasta. No, I say pasta, but that's neither here nor there. We can keep quiet, or we can decide something that's wrong and need to make it right. We use principles to do it. Or we see the future unfolding all over us. It's pretty simple. It's all up to us. It's up to you. It's up to us to be that stick in the spokes, if nothing else. Thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for all the support and all the donations. And thank you for supporting the hosts and what their needs are. I really appreciate that. And the websites, reallibertymedia.com, Grimner and the Blogcaster, and my ability to put archives up. We also have something called Internet Radio. I think I just noticed was a little link that went through. Internet Radio is some kind of a directory. We got another place to be, folks, to listen to the broadcasts. You got UCY.tv and Jules putting up simulcasting the broadcast, and we have Grammy Mary and WorldTruth.org social network. Maybe you want to get involved with that, even though it's beyond me. There's just so much going on. I don't understand lots of it. And all my the terrestrial broadcasters out there, I do appreciate you. Podcasts are available, folks. The archive's there, and tell other networks to pick this broadcast up if you think I'm having something to say. And send them email, markonthebeast@yahoo.com, if you have something to contribute and donate for me to bring back out to other people. Thank you. Take care.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
Opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.